Here's what we're doing tonight. You're going to live vote on what I speak about through the entire night tonight. So here's the thing. As a staff, I went through 48 different topics that we can get at tonight. We dwindled it down to about 20, and then you voted through this past week. If you didn't, it's too bad, because now you don't have a say. And we gave you 20 options, but we separated them into 4 groups, and you voted. And we have 2 groups that won out. And what we want to do tonight is we're going to break it down, A versus B, and you get to vote which one I actually talk about. Now, you're probably thinking, maybe some of you are like, well, why should we trust you? That's a very good question. My wife asks the same thing. But I want to let you know, I do not consider myself an expert on every single piece of information that I'm going to share tonight. The other thing is this, in my young 35 years of living, I have experienced a lot of this stuff by my own mistakes and learned through them. Over 12 years of pastoring and working with especially young adults and younger and walking through just some stuff, you need to know that I put a lot of work and research into whatever I speak when I come up here on Sunday nights. And so a lot of this content comes from that. And so I don't consider myself an expert at all, but I consider myself somewhat knowledgeable about it. And I am open to ongoing discussion with you beyond. Now, another thing too is every single one of these topics, I could probably do a whole evening on. I'm going to try to compact each one into about 5 minutes. Okay? So let's be fair to each other here. If I don't get to something, don't throw anything at me yet, okay? Find me in the lobby. If you got to do something there, you can do it there. But I'm going to try to get through as much as possible. We love these nights, so we haven't done it in a while, and we want to give you a bit of control and a little bit of work to do tonight. And so here's the 2 groups that won out. There's a choose your own adventure night. So how do I read the Bible? What's wrong with a little pot? Is masturbation, looking at porn really that bad? Let someone else order your food. I'm lonely and I can't seem to get out of it. That is A. Now, I think it was B that won out actually on Thursday. So church seems fake. What's normal / abnormal anxiety, good sex. The dead have a lot to say and things I wish I knew when I was in my 20s. If you are not following us on Instagram, it's all happening on Instagram. You need to follow us at The Project YEG. You are going to need your phones. We need you to vote. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a topic. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to 45 seconds to actually vote. And whichever one wins out, I'm just going to go at it. Okay? Are we okay with that tonight? Awesome. It should be a lot of fun. I've been really looking forward to this. I will be honest with you. I have 0 notes with me or anything like that. And so I want you to feel as much as I feel a little anxious about this. Maybe a little bit of abnormal anxiety, to be honest. So here's the first grouping that you're going to have to wrestle with. So do you want me to speak about how do I read the Bible or church seems fake? All right. We have a winner of this one. It is church seems fake. How many of you voted for that? Just with your voices. Yeah, okay. Let me guess. There's about 53% of you that voted no. Church seems fake. This is a really, this is actually something that we get pretty often here at the Project. I think a lot of churches, it probably in a different language. Like the church feels like they're like filled with hypocrites. And I always respond with, well, like, aren't you glad they're at least in church? If you want hypocrites anywhere, church is trying to work through character issues. Now, here's the thing. In so many ways, you're absolutely right. Church can feel and seem super fake. And there's probably a few reasons for it. One is because, to be honest, have you ever this whole month we've been talking about goals and setting goals and how I think it's like 92% of us never complete our goals. And it's amazing how even in our own life, we can set ourselves out to do something and actually just never accomplish that commitment. And there's this idea of like being fake to ourselves because we're humans. I mean, to be honest, none of us really get it right. None of us are perfect. And the whole premise of the Christian faith, if you're unfamiliar with it, and maybe you are, you've heard it through other places or just in cultural artifacts like movies or TV shows, whatever, is the idea that Christianity is not based on how good we are. It's a concept that because we are imperfect, and Christ is perfect, and he doesn't, he's not solved this issue of sin based on my merit or your merit, but purely based on the idea that he, like any father would do with a kid, if he could absolve them of their sins, he would. But there's a sense, though, in the Bible where we should be moving towards better character formation. That we should be working towards being people of greater peace and greater love, and especially love. I mean, there's this guy named Paul in the Bible, and he says this: listen, I don't care if you're able to like call down thunder from heaven, or if you're able to move that mountain, or if you're able to call someone out. I don't care about any of that stuff. The biggest thing is this: do you have love? And is it shown in the way that you treat other people? That's literally the greatest thing. Even Jesus said the greatest commandment is this: love God and love others. He says everything about Christianity is really summed up in that. The church can be really terrible at those things. It can be. But I'll say this: at any point where you're involved with another human being, at some point you're going to have disingenuousness. You're going to have some sort of fakeness cropping up. The church has done its part. I mean, all these scandals that have come up, even in the last 5 years, whether it's been through Me Too or these other issues that have come up, I mean, over and over again, what you face, confront, is a church that has a lot of issues. And people with major issues, that they need to have consequences for those things. They're just not absolved from those things. Definitely, there's that reality. But I also think there's partly unfair expectations. Whether it's a church's fault or society's fault, I don't know. But there are some expectations that if you're in church, you should be perfect. Now, that's not really the way it works. I heard one person say it this way, is that you actually should expect someone maybe who doesn't follow Christianity, you should expect to find someone with more morality than some people that are in the church, because the church is for broken people. It's for people who don't have it all together. That the church is filled with people who just need help. And there is, again, a component of character formation, but also sometimes you look at certain churches and everything looks really good on the outside. And I think that's the way we position ourselves, that we look good on the outside. And sometimes we do a bad job of explaining that it has nothing to do with the exterior. It's all about the inside. Even Jesus said, I care about what's in the heart. I care about how you treat other people. And how you treat people is a huge indication of what's going on the inside. So I'd say this: if you're in a situation where you feel like the church seems fake, I'd ask you this question: do you have the same expectation on yourself than you do of the church? Because really, the church is just made up of you and me. And I always say this: it's very easy to point out issues in church without attempting to be the solution to those issues. And I think no matter where you are in any place where there's, again, any more than you're going to find an area of fakeness, of disingenuousness, of hypocritical living and thinking. You're going to find that, right? It's like, I love helping people out, but if I look at your budget, all you do is spend money on yourself. I mean, aren't you fake? We all have that. The idea is this, though. If you want to be in a church and you want to kind of work through those things, that's why we think small groups are really great. Because small groups allow you to get into these positions where you're relating to each other, and some of those quirks can come out. And this is the strength of the church, is that quirks should come out. Vulnerability should happen, but with increased vulnerability comes increased ugliness, comes increased messiness in our lives. But it's in those places that we find the grace of Jesus to help each other work through those things, to move towards maturation, and to find growth in some of those areas, not so that we can be perfect, just so that we can find wholeness. But that takes a long time, right? That takes a lot of life. And so I'd encourage you, find maybe a smaller community of people in the place you find yourself in, get to know each other. That to me is the most beautiful aspect of church, is finding a small group of people where you're able to be open and honest with, and to be able to break with each other, be able to mend with each other. And I think when we have pockets like that love each other well and love others really well, I think our perception will change too. Church seems fake. You're absolutely right. But if you're ever involved in any sort of community with people where there's more than you're going to find the exact same thing anywhere else. Should there be higher expectations on the church? Yeah, I think so. I think there should be. But again, how are you being the solution to that issue? Or are you someone who's just standing back and pointing out all the issues? Does that make sense? Do we got work to do? I totally think we do. And I think it's right when we call the church out on doing something wrong it shouldn't be doing. But again, I turn around and go, how can you and I be the solution to that problem so I can fix it, and so you can fix it, and so we can better what church is about? Cool? I know, God, you probably got so many questions. And I was like, man, I can go down so many rabbit trails. And so if you want to have a longer conversation about it, I'd love to have it with you. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to move on to the next question, and it's this. Here's the next vote. What's wrong with a little bit of pot versus what's normal versus abnormal anxiety? Go ahead. It's live. Vote on there. It's the story. All right. And the winner is what's normal versus abnormal anxiety. That's where we're going to go. That was pretty close too, actually. I know. Some of you are like, I want to know, can I smoke pot or not? You can actually go to our last series in October. We actually talk about pot and give you an answer about, okay, abnormal normal anxiety. It's a really good question. I think you probably know this, maybe you don't, but anxiety is one of the largest growing mental health issues among our age group. Anxiety, depression, feelings of loneliness, all those things are actually on the huge rise. And I think sometimes it's really hard to sort through what's normal and what's abnormal anxiety. This one's a bit of a tougher question to answer because I know that every single person in this room is very unique. And the way that you handle anxiety and what you can absorb and can't absorb really depends on your history, depends on kind of who you are and your makeup. And so I want to be very careful with this question. Part of me wanted the pot question because I know that this can be really hard to navigate as a person, but I want to help you out as much as possible with this. Because there are some people who do come to my office and they have a level of anxiety. There is a normal level of anxiety though. At some point in your life, if you've not already, if you've been grown up in some sort of weird biodome, you have felt some anxiety. Anxiety is actually very closely equated with the emotion of fear. And anxiety can actually be a healthy thing. Anxiety can be something that kind of gives you a bit of a warning. You know, you have anxiety before you go, and there's people tonight that are actually studying for finals that start this week. And we know during this time, there's a lot of you that are really anxious. And that's a bit of a normal anxiety. Am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to work it out? And there's a sense of normal anxiety. Actually, you're allowed to, if it's normal for yourself, you're actually able to respond to the anxiety in a bit of a healthier way, like using it as a sense to motivate you to study. Using it in a way to motivate yourself to do something that can help alleviate some of that pressure and anxiety, or it moves you towards, let's say you found something about your health and the anxiety moves you to responding to dealing with those health issues. And there's that normal level of anxiety where we all feel it, and it's usually for smaller seasons in our life. And maybe you're anxious about, you don't have a significant other, you're anxious about maybe what job you're gonna get, and maybe it doesn't override everything, but you just have that anxiety. That's actually a normal level of anxiety. And one of the reasons why they say there's a huge rise in it is because there's a rise in helicopter parenting, where a lot of parents, there's obviously some mom and dad issues in here, and there are some really good things that helicopter parenting did, but there are some actual consequences too. And I've even seen it in the last 10 years I've been working with a lot of young adults, is sometimes they have a very hard time making a decision because a lot of decisions were made for them. Or there was a rescue from consequences. When I was doing adolescent development studies, they would say the three things that adolescents need are good food, activity, and to feel their consequences. And as many people who grow up without having to feel the weight of their consequences. And so when it comes to having to make decisions on their own, not used to having to make it on their own, not able to deal with the reality that when you say yes to something, you actually have to say no to other things. And it makes it really hard. And the pressure's hard. Also, I mean, with the rise of tuition costs has gone up, and what hasn't followed the rise of tuition, job availability. More young adults are actually living at home with their parents for longer. More young adults are putting off getting married. Less young adults are engaging in sexual activity. There is this sense that it's like, I've got to get my life together in order to make big decisions. And there's some good stuff to that. But there's a bit of normal anxiety. But when it's abnormal is when it crosses a threshold where you feel like it starts actually controlling your life. Where it's keeping you up at night. You're not able to work well. It's starting to affect your relationships. Other people are going to say, are you okay? Like, this seems to be a little bit worse than normal. If you feel like you're not able to handle your anxiety, that is a very good indication that you should try to find someone to talk to. That you should either see a counselor or see a guidance counselor or a really good close friend that you can entrust them with what's going on. When you feel like it's getting beyond the point where you can't handle it anymore, like I said, it's beginning to kind of creep its way into different parts of your life, it's a really good indication that it's beginning to go beyond the threshold of normal into abnormal. And like I said, that's different for every single one of you. And so one person may say, I can handle the pressures of exams and finals. Yeah, it's a lot, but I can handle it. Whereas the same person, almost identical life, can say, I can't handle it. Like, I'm not sleeping. I feel like I got to take pills to go to sleep now. I feel like I'm throwing up every day. I I don't want to talk with friends, like I'm not able to concentrate. Just because you handle anxiety different doesn't make you worse, doesn't make you less strong or less courageous. It just makes you you, and that's okay. Because you can be in a different situation and it can be the total reverse. And so if you feel like you can't handle the anxiety, that's a good indication that it's past the threshold of what you can handle and control. Reach out for help. Find someone you trust. You've heard me say this over and over again. If you reach the age of 24, 25 and have not seen a counselor, you're doing life wrong. Everyone should get a checkup from the neck up at some point. And you should probably get the rest of your body checked too, by the way. Yeah, I just channeled the voice of your mom and your dad there, but you need to do that. Okay, again, let's move on. The next one is this. Is masturbation or looking at porn really that bad versus good sex? We made both of these delicious for you, so go ahead and vote. Isn't it a terrible word to use when I talk about this? Yeah. We have a winner with an overwhelming 65% compared to the other ones. I'm not surprised all of you want to know about good sex. So I went ahead and brought some diagrams. Yeah. Some of you are like, I wish you weren't joking. Yeah, we'll talk about the porn stuff after. Yeah, this is a really good question. It's actually something we did talk about in February in our series, but it is something that we want to bring up again because it is one of those questions like good sex. I think we all want good sex. We all want to get into a relationship we feel like that is satisfied. I mean, there's some people who are like, how do I know that I'm going to enjoy the person I married if we never have sex before? Well, it's like, well, you don't really know the difference, if you've not had sex before. But anyways. And plus, if your idea is about comparing sexual partners, you're already going to have terrible sex. Good sex, I'd say this. Good sex, I always say it's like, good sex requires a good amount of foreplay. And foreplay, what I mean is this, because you're like, man, he's actually talking about good sex. Yeah. Here's the thing that I've learned in just about 13 years of marriage. One thing I was terrible at, terrible, yeah. I'm just digging myself a hole here, was intimacy. This is why I bring this up, because there is this like really interesting book in the Bible that most Christians are told to avoid. I don't know why. It's Song of Solomon or Songs of Songs. It's different wings, but there is this like passionate sexual book. And some of you have never read the Bible. You're like, I'll read it now. And there is this sense, this poetic, like loving, intimate relationship between this man and this woman. And both of them are sharing these intimate details of what they love about each other, including their bodies and what they love about their mind, what they love about their heart and their souls and how they chase each other. And there is this reality that I think we don't get, that the act of sex devoid of actual real good intimacy will always equal bad sex. And I would say this, if you want to have a relationship, and as Christians, you need to know that our sexual ethic includes sex after marriage, not beforehand. And there's other reasons. I don't want to get into it right now because it would take way too much time. And so that's the context I'm moving from is I think if you're here and you're not married and, whether you're engaged or not dating, whatever, one of the best things you can do, especially guys, is build a really, really good habit of understanding your emotions and sharing them. Build your ability to communicate really well with another human being. Because if you're able to listen well and communicate well, sex is like this amalgamation of all those things that happen. That whenever, someone who's married, me and my wife, and all those things, when we have sex, it's not an idea of like, it's just an act. A lot of it is like, we've had 3 kids together. We've gone through huge loss in our life. We've gone through ups and downs in our marriage. We've gone through counseling. We've gone through other things that we've done together. We've gone through city changes. We've gone through buying homes together. We've gone through losses. We've gone through disappointments, all those things. And that is what actually makes great intimacy and great sex. The idea is that we have this ongoing way of showing each other that we give ourselves our all. And the act of being intimate, and if you have a really good friend or whatever the case, and you practice that kind of intimacy, of sharing your emotions, you begin learning what it means to get undressed before you actually get undressed. A good dating relationship or move towards intimacy feels like a mental and emotional and a spiritual undressing. As you open up with vulnerability and you share who you are and who you wish you were and who you're not, and creating an area of safety for the other person to do the same thing. And so that in the most vulnerable act you can do as a human, you both feel safe. That's why I actually think sex in marriage is the best kind, because there's that commitment to say, no matter your flaws physically or emotionally, I'm sticking with you, I'm committed to you for life. We're going to do this. And you can practice this in your friendships, not sex, but you can, create a very weird vibe with your other friends. But again, becoming really comfortable with your emotions, and I'm terrible at this. I've had to relearn how to do this. I'm terrible at it. Understand what you're feeling and being able to share that. I'm not saying every time you get together with the buddies and you're watching football and you're like, do you just know how this makes me feel? No, but it is something that you probably should practice, because your spouse will appreciate it. Because the idea is, how do I create an environment of safety for the other person, while at the same time feeling confident about who I am, to be vulnerable in the right places, in the right spaces, and to learn the hard way about that, so that when we are going to be the most intimate we could possibly be, the most vulnerable we could possibly be, we both feel really safe. We both feel this is really great. Studies show, longitudinal studies show, it's not just Christian studies, but committed lifelong relationships tend to have better sex as the decades go by because of this reality. That there ends up being this trust that's built over time that actually leads to better sex as time goes on. Is why I brought up this other question, masturbation and looking at porn really bad. Masturbation and porn, and you're not supposed to answer those questions, but tricked you. I'm answering both here. Masturbation and porn, whatever your stance on it, now as a Christian, our ethic again is one of this deemed what's called sexual immorality, which means basically any way that is defrauding you or someone else of something very important, especially when it comes to the sexuality. And whatever your ethic is on it, studies have shown that what's teaching adolescents about sex these days is actually porn more than sex education, healthy sex education. They see this in the rise of anal sex and also in violent sex, that it's mostly promoted. Those are the most viewed kind of porn. Masturbation and porn is a very singular event in a sense. Well, not in a sense, it kind of is. But, there's this concept, though, of it's like you get it when you want it, how you want it, with who you want it, and you're in total control of it. The problem is that a healthy, loving, committed relationship works totally opposite to that. And you'd be like, no one else is getting hurt in it. Well, one, I would say you are, and your view of relationships is, but secondarily, it is defrauding of the other person who's involved in it. I don't know if you know this, but the sex industry is not always a really great industry. And it perpetuates sexual violence all around the world. And it's one of the reasons why we think it's super unhealthy for you to engage in. I know part of the question, though, is I know I'm Christian, I'm trying to wait before marriage, but man, it's getting really tough. And it's true, you live in a very sexualized society. And you need supports, you need help, I get that. But this is something, engaging in this will actually only make it harder and worse. It won't make things actually any easier for you. We'll leave it at that, because I'm going way over time. If you want to have more discussion about it, I'm open. Even if you disagree with me, I'm totally okay with that. I'm totally comfortable with it. Let's engage a conversation if you want more about it. Let's go to our next one. It's this. Let someone else order your food versus the dead have a lot to say. It's 50-50. Let me double check. Yo, on the dot. If anyone ever says that young adults can't agree on anything, send them a picture of that. Well, I can answer these both pretty quickly, actually. The dead have a lot to say. If you ever want to know what your future holds, if you ever want to know kind of what matters at the end of your life, isn't all of us like this idea of like we're always choosing what's next and what happens, what we want, what we don't want. And I don't know about you, but like when you're in the middle of deciding so many things as we all do, I mean, think of all the decisions you got to make, what school you go to, whether you want to stay in that school or not. And am I happy with my career? Is this what I want to do? Am I going to make enough money? Am I going to be able to pay off my debt? Because I got tons of it. You know, who am I going to marry? Am I going to marry? Am I going to like them? Are we going to get divorced? Are we going to have kids? Do they want kids? What if they do? Like, there's so many decisions that need to be made. There are so many. And so there is this idea of like, I wish I could just foretell my future. You know, I don't know if that's really the best way to go about life, is just knowing every step of the way. I think part of it is discovering it. But if you ever want to know, like have a plumb line that keeps you on the most important things in life. I learned this when I was really young. I'm glad I did. Read people who have already lived a long life. I find when I read, I joked for a while. I remember someone was like, what kind of books do you read? I'm like, I have a lot of dead mentors. And they looked at me like, you're weird. You know, it's like, I will never engage in a conversation with you again. But the reason I said this is like, I want to know at the end of people's life what they thought was the most important thing. Because I don't want to lose sight of that. I want to make sure at the end of it all that what was most important, I kept most important, because there are so many other things vying for my attention and my time. And I found after reading a lot of people who've gone before me, they typically say around the same things. Don't worry so much, or this concept of like, make sure that the most important things stay the most important things, like your family and your friends and stuff like that. Make sure that stays important. It's like, don't give your whole life to your job. You will never have enough money, so find a way to be content. Read people who have died, who have written about their life, or people have written about their life to get an idea of what actually matters. Not only is it so inspirational, but it's so informative. I said this, I think, last week or a couple weeks ago. I said, our generation is flush with knowledge, but have very little wisdom. We don't know how to apply all that. Dead people have. So I can encourage you, read classics, read biographies, read people who have gone before you. Maybe they're not dead yet. Read people who are generations older than you, who you respect, and you see what they have, and you're like, man, what matters the most? I think it is one of the best ways that you can find out what matters the most. And I think decade after decade going, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I did that. Read dead people. Let someone else order your food is a bit of the same vein, but it just basically means this. Sometimes I in my leadership small group, there's a few of you who've taken it, and I've said this before, if you ever want to stay a little bit more fresh and creative, go to a restaurant, let someone else order your meal for you. And so we're like, oh, that's fun, and it is fun. It's provides a lot of anxiety for me personally, but it can be fun. One reason I do this is because how do you feel when someone else takes control of your food? How does it make you feel? If someone were going to order you a lobster and you're like, I'm allergic to shellfish, and process those emotions, because another thing I always teach about is like, we'll never really know our blind spots. We always have blind spots in our life, things we don't notice about ourselves. And sometimes when you ask someone to order food and you ask yourself, why do I feel that way? Why do I need control over this? Why do I order the same thing? It's just a really, really fun way of discovering kind of who you actually are versus who you think you are. I'm adventurous. You touch my food, I'll kill you. There's food is just such a personal thing, right? Maybe it's not food. Maybe it's like, give someone 50 of your own dollars and let them spend it the way they want to spend it. And how you deal with control or lack thereof helps you remain a little bit more nimble in life and going, maybe I got to give a bit more control up a little bit. Anyways, I won't go any further. Last one. I'm lonely and I can't seem to get out of it versus things I wish I knew when I was in my 20s. Go ahead, vote. Things I wish I knew when I was in my 20s. Yeah, great question. A few things I wish I knew in my 20s. A few things. One is this. I only really just kind of learned to embrace this over the last about 2 years or so. So I'm way behind. And it's this. You can only know or control what's in front of you. There is no one that can hold you responsible for what you do not know, which is your future. You are purely only responsible for what you know right now. Whatever position you find yourself in, with whatever privilege you have, whatever responsibility, whatever it is, you are going to make mistakes in life. You are going to get down the road 10 years later and tell yourself you were an idiot. But at that point, if you made the best decision, knowing everything you knew and you thought that was the right one, that's all you should hold yourself to. That's it. The reason why I'm bringing that up is when you look through Scripture and you look through the Bible a lot of the times, God is always intersecting in the present moment. Essentially saying right now what is going on. Right now, with the best of your knowledge, do you know, one of my favorite verses in Ephesians talks about making really great decisions. Know what the Lord wants from you at this point and be careful. Listen, most of us have a good idea of what's right and what's wrong, or have an idea of what's the best thing. But even if you don't know, if you are making a decision right now that you feel is the best one you can make, that's the only thing God or anyone else can keep you accountable to. Because you cannot control what you don't control. So some of you are here and you're worried about, well, what if this turns into this? What if it turns into that? I'm not saying don't take non-calculated risks. You do everything you possibly can. But honestly, guys, sometimes you just have to make a decision and just be okay with whatever happens. A lot of the times it will be the right decision. Sometimes it will be a bad decision, but if you felt like you made the best decision you possibly can at that moment, then you made the best possible decision you made. And can I tell you, that's actually how life unfolds. Life is not knowing to make the perfect decision at the perfect time all the time. That's not how life unfolds. Life unfolds moment by moment. And in the point of the story that you're in right now, are you just making what you feel is the best decision you could be making if you're a Christian according to what you believe what God would want you to do, or what you know is right? It's like, do I kick this baby or do I not? Well, the Bible's pretty clear on that. And so is the rest of society, by the way. But have you talked with people that you felt like are wise people or know maybe a bit more than you? But at the end of the day, leads me to the second thing. Your life is a sum of the commitments you make, not by the things you wish you had. Some of you are looking for a dream job. Quit looking for your dream job. It doesn't just pop out of the air. This is hi, I'm here to offer you your dream job. It's time. No one does that. Listen, if you are not committed to the job you're in right now and treat it like it is your dream job, you're never going to get to your dream job. Why? Because you're a crappy employee. If you can't work with what you're with right now and do it well and with integrity and learn a way to find what you can learn there, what makes you think you're going to do the same thing later on in life? Some of you are I want to be rich so I can, I'll give to a lot of the poor. I'm if you're not giving to the poor when you're poor, you're not going to be giving to the poor when you're rich. You just will never have enough. Your life is made up by the decisions and commitments you make, not by what you wish you did. It's not by good intentions. So, who do you want to be? What kind of person do you want to be? You are responsible right now for making the commitments that will get you closer to that person. And if you're waiting for it to happen, you may be waiting a very long time. So, make those commitments. The other thing I want to share is, and I've touched on it previously, is No one else, no one. Very few people will ever ask you how you're doing financially. It's at this point in life where if you don't learn to handle your finances, they will constantly handle you. Do you know that one of the major things Jesus talks about in the Gospels is actually money? Because money has a way of showing us where our hearts actually are at and our lives are at. If you have a problem with money today, it will only snowball into worse tomorrow. Don't be ashamed by it. Money is like water. It has to constantly be managed. And so if you're having problems financially, now is the time to find help, not 5 years down the road. Find help. If you have a hard time with it, like you just got a hole in your pocket, you just want to spend. Like my son, my oldest, he's like this. He's just like, I got $5, I'll spend it on everything I can. My other daughter's like, I'm going to save. And I was like, bless your heart, little girl, right? But Josh was like just spending, and one thing I'm trying to teach him is that value of money. And because some of us aren't able to equate that, we're just not good with it. Find someone who's good at it and help you do it so that you get control over it. Because when you've got control over your money, when you own your money, you won't be owned by it. So get a handle of it. One of the things I always tell people is you should live your life, your money this way, is give, save, live. And so always have a certain amount of money that you're giving away. It releases control. For the Christian, it reminds you, that God says is like, what I've given you is for you to steward well. And part of it is the idea of giving it back. Save. Have money that you can save, even if it's like $5. Put $5 away every month. And then live is just pay your bills, do what you need to do, and your responsibilities, paying off your debts, all that jazz. But no one's going to ask you how you're doing financially. Very few times will you run into that. Take care of your money. I wish I would have known that. I wish I would have known that in my 20s. Because I made a lot of issues financially, and my wife helped me move back to a safer place, and it's great. But like, you need to do that. You need to take care of your money. The other thing I would say, I wish I knew in my 20s, I wish I would have understood the Bible better. This is what I mean by it. A lot of us approach the Bible in a way where it's just like, well, we'll read like a Tolkien book, or read like a book we pick up from the library, but it's a very different kind of book. You got to think it's written centuries ago by multiple authors in different genres of literature in there. And the way that the ancient Near East understood and revealed God and wrote about him will be different than how we write about him today, because our language is different. And the Bible is something that you don't read to just get out of it. You read in a sense of, like I say, it's almost like walking through a garden, and you pick up certain things and you smell it and you read it and you think about it, you take it in, and sometimes it tastes really gross. You don't like what you read. Some things you love what you read. Some things you don't understand, and all of that is okay. All of that is okay. And understand that your relationship with God and your relationship with the Bible needs to be the same. It's exploratory. It's just praying through the confusion, praying through the hurts, praying through things you understand and don't understand. And being okay with the places you don't understand, being places that you're angry at, places you don't understand. And I would say, get some help. Get some help reading it if you want help reading it. I wish I would have read more. Honestly, majority of my issues would have been solved if I just read a dumb book. Read something. Read something. Something else I wish I knew in my 20s. Girls are very different. Oh man, girls are very different. I got married young. I got married at I think it was 22 or 23. And I love the fact that we got married young, but I'll say this though, don't rush into it. Marriage will be the hardest thing you do in your life. Someone said this way, it'll be the thing that brings you closest to heaven, be like, aw, and the closest to hell you're ever gonna get. And I was like, and it's true. There's nothing that is going to grate at you and nothing that's going to be as joyful to you than having to commit to one person for the rest of your life. And there's a lot of people just rushing into it without knowing what they're doing. And I tell people, unless you really find someone that you can live in the mundane with and do that with, marriage is so difficult. It's wonderful, but it's very difficult. Take your time. Don't rush into it. Other thing is, you will never have this much lateral freedom in your life until maybe your kids are gone and you're retired. So use it. Travel a bit. Experience the world. Do different things. And it's just, you're not really going to have this time. You're like, well, I got like bills to pay, cell phone, rent. But when you move on, you may have a career you can't get away from. You have kids that, unfortunately, you can't just leave at home when you want to leave, a spouse, things like that. I tell most people, the only way you discover yourself is by experiencing things. And the best thing you need to know is who you are versus who you think you are, and figuring out the difference. And that requires experiencing things. And so be open to that. Try new things. Let someone order your food for you. Do a bit of travel. Do what you can in this time. You're never going to have this kind of lateral freedom again in your life. Do that. Trying to think if I'm missing anything really big. You're probably saying the same thing, right? It's just like, okay, that's good, but are you missing anything super important that I need to know right now? Yeah, those are major ones for me. The other thing is this: I'm 35. I'm at literally there's no one else in Canada doing what we're doing, which is pretty cool to think about at the project. And what if I told you that I'm still a human being not satisfied? That reaching a certain point in my life where I have a wife and I've got 3 kids and I'm at a job I love and I've been at it, there's still a sense of me is like, yeah, but is there more? And I've realized how ungrateful I can be. Learn to be grateful. It'll be the most powerful thing you do. The second part to that as well is the concept that at the end of the day, I look back and I'm like, the most important things to me have been those close communities of people. Friends change throughout this time of life. A lot of you feel lonely because your friends are changing. They adapt. You change. You adapt. And you got to decide, what are the friendships that I'm just willing to fight for? The relationships I'm willing to fight to keep. And some of the relationships I've got to be willing to let go of. Whether it's circumstance or it's distance, whatever the case. But decide on the ones you want to keep. That you're just like, these are good for my soul. These are good for me, and I know it's good for them, and I'm going to hold on to them and fight for those relationships. The other thing is find a small group of people that you can be deliberately vulnerable with. That's why we do small groups here, because we think church here on a Sunday night is great, but you're not going to find community this way. You find community by investing yourself into really solid relationships and doing it over a period of time, and that's going to do so good for your soul, so much for your character, and so much for your health if you do that. I wish I would have known that was younger. And lastly, honestly, once you turn 30, your body does weird things. And so if you're not active now before you're 30, you're going to be like, why the H did I not do this earlier? Because now it sucks. I reached for a bottle of shampoo the other day and I threw my back out. And I'm like, should I even be doing the project anymore? Because I think I'm way too old now. Get it control, or y'all going to be suffering. I want to end just with this. I'm really pumped about our next series, God is Dead. In my life, I went through a period of 2 or 3 years of shedding a lot of what I grew up believing, shedding it away and tearing it all apart, reading things that we were told not to read over and over again and just getting into it. And it wreaked havoc in my life for a season. But I came out of there actually with a better and broader view of God. This next series is not based on me giving you an apologetic on why other people are wrong. Next month is a series on all these critics and people who've got things against Christianity and how actually they give us a better and broader view of God. And that unless we do the work of asking these very difficult questions ourselves, the quality of your faith will be very porous. And unless we get into these really good discussions about what's going on outside of the Christian world, we won't have a really good grip on what we believe, but not just what, but why we believe it. And so I'm really pumped for this series because I think there is this, especially coming in Easter season, there is a point in biblical history where God was literally dead. Decisions had to be made. And I think there's a lot of great things. We're talking about exclusivity of Jesus. So if I was born in the Middle East and I didn't know anything about God, does that mean that I'm going to hell? How could he be so exclusive? We're talking about the idea of suffering. If he's a good God, why can't he do anything? Does that mean that he's not omnipotent? Does it mean he's not all powerful? Like, what's going on? We're talking about hell. Did God actually say you're going to hell if you don't believe the right things? And then lastly, we're going to be talking about some of the problems with the Bible and how we understand it. I'm pumped for the series. To be honest, it's a lot of weight on my shoulders, but I'm super pumped for it because I know there's a lot of you in this room and a lot of you that are not in this room who are asking these questions, and we kind of want to go at it next month. And so if you know someone who you think would benefit from it, not just yourself, invite them. If they don't want to come to church, let's watch it online together at my house or somewhere. But I'm pumped for the series. We're pumped for it. Guys, thanks for being here tonight. I hope you enjoyed this format. Did you enjoy this format? Like this? Yeah, it's good. Awesome. But guys, have a great night. Have a great week. We're praying for you as you go into finals. And we're excited to see you next month to start a new series, God is Dead. Have a good one, guys.